This is a story about how dangerous it can be to think you truly know someone. Sometimes you believe you have a good read on a person, their personality, their intentions, their limits. But the truth is, people can hide things in ways you never expect. This happened about 4 or 5 years ago, and even now, I still think about it sometimes, wondering how close we might have come to something far worse. At the time, life had been wearing me down. Work was stressful, money was tight, and everything felt repetitive and exhausting. My girlfriend Stacy was feeling the same way. One night she suggested that we take a short trip, just the two of us, somewhere quiet, somewhere we could relax and reset. She found a cabin deep in the woods, far away from the noise of everyday life. The idea sounded perfect to me. The only problem was money. We weren't exactly in a position to afford a getaway like that on our own. That's when Stacy suggested inviting my best friend Randy and his girlfriend along. We were all close, and splitting the cost would make it manageable. Plus, it could turn into a fun couples trip. When I pitched the idea to Randy, he was immediately on board. Everything seemed to fall into place. We booked a cozy cabin with a fireplace for the end of the month. It was the middle of winter, so we wanted something warm and comfortable. A place where we could sit by the fire, play games, cook together, and just escape reality for a few days. We spent the next couple of weeks planning meals, buying supplies, and getting excited about the trip. Then, less than a week before we were supposed to leave, Randy called me and told me he and his girlfriend had broken up. It wasn't a calm breakup either. It was messy, sudden, and clearly emotional. That immediately complicated everything. Stacy and I talked about whether we should offer to give Randy his money back or adjust the trip somehow. We didn't really have the funds to cover the full cost ourselves, but it also didn't feel right to make him pay for something he wouldn't enjoy. When I called Randy, though, he shut that idea down immediately. He told me not to worry about it and insisted that we still go and enjoy the trip. He said we deserved a romantic getaway. After a bit of back and forth, we accepted it, and Stacy and I started looking forward to having the cabin to ourselves. But that didn't last long. A couple of days before the trip, Randy called again and said he had found someone else to come with us. He had already started seeing someone new and wanted to bring her along. That didn't sit right with either of us. It felt rushed, awkward, and honestly kind of risky. We didn't know anything about this woman, and neither did he, really. But Randy kept pushing. He promised she was great, that we'd like her, and to sweeten the deal, he offered to pay for my portion of the trip. Against our better judgment, we agreed. Looking back now, that was the moment everything started to go wrong. The weekend finally arrived, and we all piled into my truck for the drive to the cabin. That's when we met Lucy for the first time. She seemed quiet, almost too quiet. She barely spoke during the drive. Stacy and I tried to make conversation, asking her questions, trying to include her, but most of the time she gave short answers or just nodded. By the time we reached the cabin, I realized I could barely remember what her voice sounded like. Still, nothing about her seemed threatening at first. Just shy, maybe a little socially awkward. The cabin itself was perfect. It was exactly what we had hoped for. Isolated, peaceful, surrounded by trees and covered in a layer of fresh snow. Inside it was warm and cozy, with a fireplace that quickly became the center of everything. We unpacked, settled in, and started relaxing. That evening, Stacy suggested we play Uno, something we always loved doing. It was simple, fun, and a good way to loosen everyone up. To our surprise, Lucy seemed to open up a little during the game. She smiled, laughed quietly, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Then came the first red flag. At one point, Stacy called Uno, signaling she only had one card left. Out of nowhere, Lucy's entire demeanor changed. Her face tightened, her eyes narrowed, and she suddenly started yelling. Not joking, not playful, angry. She accused Stacy of cheating, insisting there was no way she could have only one card left. At first we laughed, thinking it was some kind of over-the-top joke. But that only made it worse. Lucy snapped. She started screaming, actually screaming, about the game. Her voice was sharp, aggressive, and completely out of proportion to the situation. It felt surreal, like watching someone flip a switch instantly. Randy tried to calm her down, but she threw her cards across the room and stormed off. The rest of us sat there in stunned silence. Eventually, we laughed it off, mostly out of discomfort. Randy apologized and said she was just competitive, but something about it didn't feel right. Later that night, things got even stranger. During dinner, Lucy started talking, really talking for the first time. But instead of normal conversation, she began oversharing deeply personal, intimate details about her and Randy's relationship. It was uncomfortable, way too personal for people she had just met. Randy looked embarrassed, and Stacy kept trying to change the subject, but Lucy didn't seem to notice. It was like she had no sense of boundaries. That night, Stacy woke me up. She told me to listen. At first, I didn't hear anything, but then I picked it up. Voices. Lucy and Randy were arguing in their room. We couldn't make out the words, but the tone said everything. It wasn't a normal argument. There was tension, anger, something deeper. We decided not to bring it up the next day. It felt too awkward. The following day was quiet. Almost too quiet. Randy seemed distant, and Lucy barely spoke at all. It was like the previous night had never happened. But that night, everything changed. I woke up suddenly to find Randy standing over me. It scared me so badly I almost jumped out of bed. He looked terrified, pale, shaken, completely unlike himself. He whispered, asking if he could stay in our room and if we could lock the door. When I asked why, he told me something I'll never forget. He had woken up in the middle of the night to find Lucy standing at the foot of the bed, just staring at him. Not saying anything, not moving, just watching. When he asked what she was doing, she calmly said she was watching him sleep, just in case. Then she turned and walked out of the room. When he got up to check on her, he noticed something on her side of the bed, a large knife. As he moved through the cabin, he saw her wandering in the dark, humming softly, almost dancing. Then she stopped, turned slightly and said, "I see you," not looking directly at him, just sensing him. That's when he came to our room. As we sat there trying to process everything, we could hear her moving through the cabin. Then suddenly the front door slammed. We checked outside and saw her walking into the freezing woods, barely dressed. Moments later, we realized the knife was gone. Stacy insisted we should go after her, but Randy refused. He was beyond terrified. While we argued, the front door opened again. She came back inside, still humming. We stayed locked in that room all night. By morning, she was in the kitchen, acting completely normal, like nothing had happened. At first, we tried to rationalize it. Sleepwalking, stress, something explainable. But then Randy found the knife again, hidden in her bag. That was enough. We packed up and left immediately. We never saw Lucy again. Randy cut all contact, and strangely, she never reached out either. It was like she disappeared completely. No social media, no records, nothing. To this day, I don't know who she really was or what she intended to do. But I do know one thing. Sometimes the scariest people aren't strangers in the dark. They're the ones you let into your life without ever truly knowing who they are. Over the past few years, I've slowly pulled myself away from the world. I've always been someone who prefers solitude over socializing, but there was a period in my life when that preference turned into something much stronger. I wasn't just introverted, I actively avoided people whenever I could. The thought of normal, everyday interactions made me anxious in a way I couldn't fully explain. Even something as simple as small talk felt exhausting. At the height of that phase, I started going to extreme lengths just to be alone. Whenever I had the money, I would rent cabins or find isolated places out in the middle of nowhere and spend my weekends there. To most people, that probably sounds unnecessary or even strange, but for me, it was the only time I felt completely at peace. No crowds, no noise, no expectations, just silence. This became a habit for about 2 years. Almost every chance I got, I would escape into the woods, bringing along a few books, some food, and the hope of disconnecting from everything else. Most of those trips were uneventful, exactly how I liked them. But there was one weekend, one cabin, that changed the way I saw those getaways forever. It started like any other trip. I found a small, secluded cabin about 2 hours from home and booked it for the weekend. The location was perfect, deep in the woods, far from any major roads or towns. Exactly what I was looking for. I packed light, just the essentials, and made the drive out there on a quiet Friday afternoon. By the time I arrived, the sun was already starting to set. I unlocked the cabin, brought my things inside, and immediately felt that familiar calm wash over me. The place was simple but cozy. Wooden walls, a small kitchen, a couch, and a heavy front door with 2 rectangular glass panels set into it. I made a quick dinner, read a few chapters of the book I had brought, and went to bed early. It was shaping up to be another peaceful weekend. The next morning I woke up feeling refreshed and decided to go on a long hike. Being outside has always been therapeutic for me. It doesn't matter if it's sunny, raining, or even snowing. I've always found comfort in nature. So I grabbed a bottle of water, put on my boots, and headed into the woods. At first, everything felt normal. The forest was quiet, with only the occasional sound of wind moving through the trees or birds in the distance. But after about 20 minutes of walking, I started to hear something else. Footsteps. Not loud, not obvious, but distinct enough to stand out. The sound of twigs snapping, leaves crunching. At first I told myself it was just natural forest noise. Animals, maybe. But something about it didn't feel random. It felt deliberate. I stopped walking and turned around. Nothing. Just trees. Silence. No movement at all. I stood there for a moment listening, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. Eventually, I started walking again. A few minutes later, the sound returned, behind me, matching my pace. Again, I turned around. Still nothing. This cycle repeated a few times, and each time the uneasiness grew stronger. My mind started racing, jumping to conclusions I knew were probably irrational. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It felt like someone was following me, staying just out of sight. Eventually, I decided to cut the hike short. Whatever peace I had hoped to find was gone. I walked back to the cabin faster than I had planned, constantly glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone there. But I never did. That night, the anxiety from earlier stuck with me. I couldn't shake it. The cabin, which had felt so calming the night before, now felt isolating in a different way. Too quiet. Too empty. To calm my nerves, I poured myself a drink. 1 drink turned into 2, then 3. Slowly, the tension faded, replaced by a dull sense of comfort. I tried to read again, but I couldn't focus. Instead, I turned on some music and just sat there, letting the alcohol take the edge off. Around 11 p.m., I heard it. A knock on the door. At first, I thought I imagined it, but then it came again, clear, unmistakable. I stood up, turned off the music, and walked toward the front door. The door was heavy, with 2 rectangular glass windows built into it. I looked through them and saw nothing but darkness. No movement. No one standing there. I turned away, assuming it was nothing. Then the knocking came again. This time, when I looked through the glass, I saw someone. A man. He was standing just far enough back that I couldn't make out details. Something about him felt wrong. I reached over and turned on the porch light. The light illuminated him, and what I saw made no sense. He was dressed in a suit, not dirty, not torn, clean, pressed, like he was on his way to a business meeting. He looked completely out of place standing in the middle of the woods at that hour. He was tall, well-built, clean-shaven, with slicked back hair. From inside, I asked him what he wanted. There was a pause. A long, unnatural pause. It was like he was processing my question before responding. Then, in a flat, emotionless voice, he said he had been driving with his girlfriend earlier, that they had gotten separated, and he had been wandering for hours trying to find her. He said he was lost and needed to come inside to call for help. Something about his tone didn't match his story. There was no panic, no urgency, no emotion at all. I told him to step away from the door and wait at the end of the driveway. I said I would call someone for help. Again he paused. Then he said he needed to come inside, that something was outside, that he needed to hide. The tension in that moment was overwhelming. Every instinct I had was telling me not to open that door. I told him I was calling the police and that he could either wait outside or leave. As I turned to grab my phone, he said something that made my stomach drop. "I need to hide inside." Before I could react, he started pounding on the door. Not knocking, pounding. The sound echoed through the cabin, violent and aggressive. I ran back toward the door, shouting at him to leave, yelling anything I could think of to make him go away. Then I heard it. Laughter. Cold, unsettling laughter. I looked through the glass again, and this time his face was right there, pressed up against the window, inches away from mine. I stumbled backward in shock. Then, in a calm voice, he said something that froze me completely. "Come on, Victor, just open the door already." He knew my name. I don't remember dialing 911. I just remember telling the operator that someone was trying to break in. When I looked back at the door, he was gone. Completely gone. No footsteps. No movement. Nothing. I stood there for nearly 15 minutes, staring out into the darkness, waiting for the police to arrive. When the patrol car finally pulled up, I rushed outside and told the officer everything. He listened carefully, clearly confused. He said no one else in the area had reported anything unusual. Still, he could tell I was shaken and suggested I leave and stay somewhere safer for the night. I told him I had been drinking and didn't feel comfortable driving. Without hesitation, he offered to take me into town. As we walked toward his car, he suddenly stopped. I asked what was wrong. He pointed to my car. All 4 tires were completely flat, slashed. Whoever that man was, he hadn't just shown up randomly. He had made sure I couldn't leave. The officer drove me to a nearby hotel and stayed with me until I could contact my dad. The next morning, my dad came to pick me up and helped arrange to have my car towed. The cabin owner tried reaching out multiple times to apologize, but I ignored it. I didn't care about refunds or explanations. I just wanted it to be over. To this day, I have no idea who that man was or how he knew my name. And I don't think I ever will. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about that knock on the door and what might have happened if I had opened it. About 6 months ago, my father passed away. I'm not telling this story for sympathy. I didn't have the kind of relationship with him that would make his death feel like a huge emotional loss. He wasn't a terrible person. He just didn't know how to be a father to me. From a young age, it was clear that we were nothing alike. I didn't think the way he did, didn't value the same things, and I never became the kind of son he probably expected. Even if he never said it out loud, I think that disappointed him. So when I found out he had left me his cabin in his will, I was honestly surprised. Some of my friends joked that it was his way of messing with me one last time. But I didn't see it that way. If anything, I think he knew exactly what I would do with it. I would sell it. And maybe that's what he wanted all along. After handling all the legal paperwork, I was told that before putting it on the market, I needed to go out there, clean it up, and fix anything that might affect its value. I decided to take care of it myself. Not because I wanted to save money, but because I saw it as a final step, my way of saying goodbye to him in my own quiet, detached way. The cabin was a few hours away, deep in the woods. I hadn't been there in years, not since I was a kid. The drive out felt strange, like I was heading back into a part of my life I had already moved on from. When I finally arrived and unlocked the door, the first thing that hit me was the smell. It was overwhelming. Not just stale or musty. It smelled like something had died in there. My first thought was exactly that. Maybe an animal had gotten trapped and died somewhere inside. But I quickly remembered that my father hadn't even been to the cabin in almost a year before he passed. That made the smell even worse somehow, like it had just been sitting there, building over time. I opened a few windows and started looking around for the source, checking corners, under furniture, anywhere a dead animal might be hidden. But I didn't find anything obvious. Eventually, I just assumed it was years of neglect and poor cleaning habits. The next thing I noticed was how little had changed. The cabin looked exactly the same as it had when I was about 10 years old. The same worn-out couches, the same shelves filled with dusty books, the same layout. It was like time had completely stopped inside those walls. I spent the next few hours cleaning, scrubbing floors, wiping down surfaces, throwing out trash, anything to make the place feel somewhat livable again. It was exhausting, but also strangely calming in a way. At some point while I was working, I started hearing noises. At first it was subtle, just a faint rustling sound coming from above. I paused, listening carefully, trying to pinpoint it. That's when I remembered the attic. Calling it an attic might be generous. It was more like a cramped crawl space above the back hallway. There was a pull-down ladder attached to the ceiling, the kind you open by tugging on a cord. I hadn't thought about it in years. The noises continued. Soft movement, like something shifting around. My first thought was animals. Raccoons, squirrels, something like that. It made sense. If the place had been sitting empty for so long, it would be the perfect shelter. So I went to the back hallway and pulled the cord. The ladder creaked as it unfolded, dropping down toward the floor. I hesitated for a second, bracing myself for whatever might be up there. I was fully expecting something to jump out at me. Instead, as soon as I climbed a few steps up, I was hit with a smell even worse than before. It was suffocating. I covered my mouth and coughed, trying not to gag as I pulled myself up into the space. When my eyes adjusted, I saw what looked like a disaster zone. There were boxes everywhere, old, dusty, half-opened. But worse than that, there was trash scattered across the floor. Food wrappers, empty beer cans, random garbage piled in corners. It didn't make sense. My dad wasn't exactly a clean person, but this was something else entirely. This looked like someone had been living up there, not just storing things. The smell alone made it unbearable to stay. I grabbed a few pieces of trash near the entrance, climbed back down, and decided I'd deal with the attic the next day. I was already exhausted from cleaning downstairs, and I didn't have the energy to go through all of that. That night I made up the bed in my father's old room and tried to get some sleep. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. At first I didn't know why. Then I heard it again, the same rustling sound from earlier. Only this time it felt louder, closer. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening. My mind went back to the idea of animals in the walls. That would explain the noise, and maybe even the smell. But something about it didn't feel right. The sound wasn't random. It had rhythm to it, intent. It was coming from directly above me. After a few minutes of lying there, I got out of bed. I wasn't going to sleep again anyway, so I figured I might as well check. When I walked into the back hallway, I immediately noticed something strange. The attic ladder was already down. I stopped. I was pretty sure I had closed it earlier. But I second-guessed myself. Maybe I hadn't latched it properly. Maybe something had knocked it loose. Then I saw something on the floor. A snack wrapper, fresh-looking. I stared at it for a second, confused. I didn't remember seeing it earlier. I picked it up, tossed it in the trash, and grabbed a bottle of water before heading into the living room. I sat down on the couch, turning on a small lamp beside me. The light was dim, just enough to keep the room from being completely dark. I knew I wasn't going back to sleep, so I just sat there, letting my mind wander. Eventually my thoughts drifted back to my father. Memories of him, of this cabin, of the times I had spent there as a kid. And then something occurred to me. Why would he ever spend time in that attic? It was filthy, cramped, and disgusting. Even the rest of the cabin, as messy as it was far more comfortable than that space. So why was there so much trash up there? As I sat there thinking, something in the corner of the room caught my eye. A blanket. It was draped over something near the recliner. At first, it didn't register as strange. But then I remembered. I had cleaned that entire room earlier. I didn't remember seeing a blanket there at all. Slowly, I stood up and started walking toward it. Then I stopped. Just a couple feet away, I noticed something sticking out from under the blanket. A boot. My heart dropped. I took a step back, trying to focus in the dim light. And that's when I saw it. The blanket moved. Not much, just a slight shift. But enough. Someone was under it. I stood there, frozen, watching as the fabric rose and fell ever so slightly. Breathing. Whoever was under that blanket had been there the entire time. The noises I heard earlier weren't animals. They were a person. I didn't wait to find out anything else. I backed away slowly, trying not to make noise, then turned and walked as calmly as I could into the kitchen. The second I grabbed my phone and keys, I ran. I didn't look back. I burst out of the cabin, sprinted to my car, and jumped inside, locking the doors immediately. My hands were shaking as I started the engine and began backing down the long driveway. That's when I saw him. A man ran out of the cabin. He looked rough, dirty, unkempt, almost animal-like in appearance. He didn't chase me. He just stood there watching. I didn't stop driving until I was far enough away to feel even a little safe. Then I called the police. When I told them what happened, they weren't entirely surprised. They said that since the cabin had been empty for so long, it was possible someone had moved in without anyone knowing. Based on the condition I described, they guessed he might have been living there for months, maybe even close to a year. By the time they got there, he was gone. No trace. No sign of where he went. I never found out who he was or how he got there. But what stuck with me the most wasn't just the fact that someone had been living in my father's attic. It was how close I had been to him. I had been sitting in that cabin, cleaning, thinking I was alone, while a stranger was hiding just above me the entire time. And later, just a few feet away from me, watching. I never went back to that cabin after that night. I hired someone to clean it out completely, didn't even tell them the full story, and sold it as is. Maybe that makes me cold, but I didn't want anything to do with that place anymore. I just hope whoever owns it now never has to experience what I did, and that they never have to wonder who might be hiding in the shadows of their own home.